Hey everyone, it's Chad Ostrowski here from the TeachBetter team, and I'm here with the amazing, the wonderful Amanda Post. And today, that's right, tonight, we are going to be building a second grade math grid with Amanda live for you. So let's get started. Amanda, how are you tonight? How are you feeling?
Oh my goodness, I am so excited to do this. I have been waiting and waiting and waiting for this, and I'm kind of nervous because I'm kicking off this whole Build a Grid series, which I don't know if you did that on purpose or not, but I'm so excited. I'm a little nervous because I mean, let's be honest, anybody who gets to build a grid with the creator of the grid method, like, how did I get here? How is this my life? So I'm just so excited to have the opportunity to do this and, hopefully help some other people whenever it comes to, building a grid of their own, especially with elementary folks. So
Yes, absolutely. So I want to say thank you up front for you taking the time. And I really want to be honest here. For anyone who's built the grid, this is a very vulnerable thing, right? This is literally the first time. Thank you, and a shout out to Ray Hewart for just making this idea come to life. This is the first time that we've ever sort of built an actual grid live. And this is going to be an entire series over the next month and a half or so. And we're going to be building so many different kinds of grids and looking at different ideas at different grade levels. So before we get started, tell everybody who you are, what you teach. You can say your district, you don't have to, but just give a quick introduction and your experience with the grid so people know where you're coming from.
Sure. So if you don't know me, I'm Amanda Post. I teach second grade, and I am at Morgan Local School District in Southeast Ohio. Hi, Bree. Oh, Nikki, look at all of my ambassador friends in here joining. Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. I am also an ambassador for the TeachBetter team, which is exciting. And I'm just so thrilled to be a part of that as well. I teach second graders. So of course, when District PD provided Chad at the beginning of the year and said, hey, let's try this new crazy thing, I was like, oh yeah, sure, why not? With second graders, why not? Luckily, I had a teammate who was very supportive, Maggie Gifford. If you don't know her, you should. And we just kind of jumped in. And that was, oh my gosh, almost 3 years ago that we took that training. And ever since, we've been running grids. This is my third year running grid in second grade. And I can tell you that every single day, I am amazed that my 7 and 8 year olds can not only do this, but show such great growth and success with it. And it's just one of those things that I am so passionate about mastery learning and using this framework because it works. And you're thinking, oh, yay, Janice, yay, second grade. You think, oh, a bunch of 7th and 8th graders. Nope, wrong age. 7 and 8 year olds. Like, how could they do this? How could they possibly do this? But I will tell you something I've noticed. The kids will always rise to the occasion when you provide it. And so this here has been better for my kids than anything I've done before. I've been teaching for 8 years now, and 3 of those I've been using the grid method. And I can tell you that for those first 5 years, I feel so sorry for my children because I was just the traditional instructor, a new teacher. And, you do what you're taught. And when you finally dive into something new like this and you realize how powerful it is, there's no way I'm ever going back. So, thanks to Chad and the whole team for, going around and presenting this to everybody because this is something that's just, I just love it. So I'm just so excited to do this.
Wow, I feel like we can be done now. That was just so nice, and I love hearing all those things. This is absolutely awesome. I love that we're doing elementary grids first, because as you said, a lot of teachers, they talk to me and they say, Chad, I see this in high school. I can see this in middle school. I got it. That makes sense. But really, elementary kids, and here's the truth, right? Honestly, I've seen you run this and you do a phenomenal job. You create such a great positive culture in your classroom, and walking into your room, I get this huge feeling of just like accomplishment and pride that like this is what it looks like when it's done the right way. So I'm really glad that you're the one we're kicking this off with, and that we're going to be able to build one of your grids. And tonight we're going to be focused on elementary math. Now, just a couple things off the top. We're going to be working on this grid. I'm going to talk to Amanda. We will try to make this grid available to you via a link after the session so you can check it out or take a look. But we are also going to be sharing it on the screen so you can kind of follow along with what we're doing. A couple notes though, we only have like 60 minutes to have this conversation, and that feels like a really long time, but to make a whole grid, Amanda's probably good enough to do that in 60 minutes. I can probably do it, but like we're going to do the best we can to kind of break down the normal steps of the process. So Amanda actually, and she's kind of putting herself out on a limb here, she actually is going to be sharing one of her grids, and I'm going to put it up here on the screen in a minute. But before I do that, could you give a quick overview of just the general topic this grid's covering, and just some general maybe context for this grid that you want people to know before we put it out there to the world?
Oh, putting it out there to the world. Woo!
I need to see some green hearts in the comments,
Yes,
please.
please.
Let's see some support for Amanda Post here, putting herself out here. I love it.
So this grid is centered around 3-digit numbers and comparing those with understanding place value, and using that to not only write numbers in different ways, but to also compare those numbers and then eventually predict what will come next in a series of pattern. This grid actually covers multiple of my second grade standards because, thank you all. Look at all that love. It's a lot easier to build a grid around multiple, so you don't have to have a grid for every single standard, because we all know if we had a grid for every standard, we would never even get
100%.
through like 10 standards. So, kind of connecting all of those in one. I do have a district curriculum that we use, so you will see some things in there from that. And then I also am just pulling things that I already have. So, this is something that, I mean, it's a work in progress, and it's a compilation of things I already have. So I'm really looking forward to some information from not only Chad, but if anyone in the chat has some ideas or things like that, sure, please put those in there, because I think it's beneficial to collaborate with everybody. So yay.
Absolutely. So here it is. I tried to give you a little bit of opportunity, just give everyone a heads up. I've already looked at your grid. This is a great start. I'm really excited to kind of talk through some of these things, but here is the grid itself, right? So actually, let me see real quick is that easier for people to see. I think if we need to look at anything specifically, I'm going to make it full screen. But this is the grid. As you can see, she's still formatting. She's still plugging things in. So this is not a complete product. We are building this right now, folks. This is happening. So so you're fully aware, like we are building this from basically scratch. She's obviously done a little bit of work here, but let's take a look real quick. I'm going to see if I can zoom in. Can you guys see that? Hopefully. So here are the standards we are looking for. So when you start working on a grid, something that Amanda said that I really, really loved is that you shouldn't, if you don't have to just do one standard, right? Now, if you teach science in Ohio or another state that has big, giant standards, you might actually only have one standard for a grid because it's a really big paragraph and statement of standards, right? But with math, in a lot of ELA standards, as Amanda I'm sure knows, they're very connected and very much sort of broken down. So the first standard here is understand the that a 3-digit number represents amounts of hundreds, tens, and ones. This is really weird to me. So Amanda and I were talking, and we don't like the fact that it uses the word understand in the standard. Dave Schmidt, I was watching, and he'll know why we don't like that, because the word understand is not actually measurable. It's really hard to measure understanding of anything because it's an arbitrary word. There's no actual finite ability to measure that. So we're going to address that when we look at our targets. But anytime you start a grid, you always want to start with your standards. So the first thing we're looking for is be able to identify and apply the understanding that digits have 3 numbers. So that, for me, is DOK level 1 or 2, depending on what that word understand means, which makes it kind of ambiguous. Would you agree with that, Amanda? Like probably 1 or 2. I don't know
Yeah,
where that's falling. Just
I
because
think it's a 1. I think I placed it in 1, the information that goes with that, just because that's kind of the base level of understanding the hundreds, tens, and ones, and what they represent. So yeah, understand is just a weird word for them to put there. I'm not really sure why they did that, but that's okay.
Absolutely. So the next is counting forward and backwards within 1,000 by ones, tens, and hundreds, starting at any number, and skip counting by fives. So to me, this is a little bit more complex, right? They're not only going forward and backwards and identifying things, but they're applying sort of multiple skills. So in your head, we talk about DOK a lot. DOK level 1, basic identification, memorization. DOK level 2, application. DOK level 3, comparative analysis and thought. And DOK level 4, creative thought. Just as a quick reminder for everybody. Sorry, I didn't mean to go into that far. But so what are you feeling sort of like this application level for this next standard? Where do you feel like that falls?
Well, it's one of those things where I feel like it's in the context in which you use it, because this is one of
Okay.
those things that I have peppered throughout grids before, is something similar to
Absolutely.
this, where it's more of a spiraling thing that I use throughout instead of a
I love it.
specific thing I focus on. And a lot of times, whenever we get into this grid and look, the application of that part is actually later in our topic, which is a lot of the problem solving. And so it's based on word problems and pulling out patterns and predicting after. So I've always kind of just peppered things like this through there.
So I think you're making a really great point here. And I want to highlight this. And the thing I want to highlight is that there are standards that have components of lower and higher level DOKs inside the same statement, right? So counting forwards and backwards by ones is probably DOK level 1, but the other aspects of this standard could be a focus later on in the grid. This is really important because when we look at our targets, we could have parts of this standard in different parts of the grid, which is, I think, what you were kind of trying to say there, Amanda. And that's a really great, this is such a good example, Amanda, like so many cool little things about this. So let's talk about the next standard. So that one's a little bit different. We definitely have some 1. I definitely think we have some 2, potentially even 3, depending on the context and what we're having kids do with that information in there, okay? So DOK, this third standard is read and write numbers to 1,000 using base 10 numerals, number names, extended form, and equivalent representations. So my math vocabulary is not great. So I'm going to lean on you for where you think this falls in terms of complexity. So I just want to kind of talk through where are you thinking this DOK level falls. And just before you go into that, what I'm doing right now is identifying where I need all of the students to get to on the grid. So at what point on the grid, what level are they going to have met the minimum requirement? We really need to know where is the level of the standards we are looking at. This is literally one of the first times I glanced at them before I've looked at these. So I'm doing this live on the fly. on purpose so I can talk through what I'm thinking about. And hopefully Amanda has already thought about this a little bit more than I have, but we'll see where she's at.
So with that standard, it kind of falls in that 2 to 3 range. I have placed it in 2, simply because the way that we teach this with our curriculum, it's very scaffolded, and so it builds and builds and builds within itself. So I really like the way that it goes through and the lessons that are included with this, and then the supplemental work that I put with that. It kind of scaffolds. You go from like the easiest, reading and writing just the numbers using the base 10 numerals.
Yeah.
And then it goes through and you add the number names to that with it. Then you go through and learn how to do expanded form, which, breaking apart number into hundreds, tens, and ones. And then representing one, the equivalent representations, that would probably be the only one that I would put in level 3. And I will tell you, it is it's extremely difficult for students to understand because they have to know how to manipulate those numbers. And at second grade level, it's a very tough thing. So that's one of those things that, we work on that from oh, hey, Maggie's here. We work on this from the beginning of the year throughout multiple grids. Whenever it comes to place value, tens and ones, we do it that way. So it's something that equivalent representations, I don't necessarily focus on that specific one because I'm doing it in multiple grids across the year, but the other ones do build. So I've kind of put that in my level 2 range because they have to understand how to do that before they can move on to comparing those numbers, and they have to compare them in different ways using the base 10 numerals, using the names, using expanded form. So that's my reasoning.
Gosh. So much awesomeness to unpack in everything you just said. Like, I'm literally just trying to what should I talk about first from that? Okay, so a couple different things. What Amanda is articulating right now is that standards aren't just black and white single items, okay? They're complex. We need to know what our goal is for our students. So Amanda said something that I love, and that is this one part of the standard is going to spiral throughout the entire year. So in this grid, I don't necessarily need students to completely master that specific part because it's going to be in every grid or a lot more grids that we do. This is why we need to start. This is always the first step after we've chosen our topic. Okay. This is always the first step, is looking at your standards. You need to start with instruction. Whether you're using the grid method or not, you need to look at your standards, and you really need to take a moment. And we've literally only been doing this for like 10 minutes. Break down your understanding of what the standards are asking your students to be able to do. This is this is literally this is great. So the third one, I think this is a pretty easy kind of placement in DOK level. Compare 2 3-digit numbers based on meaning of the hundreds, tens, and ones using the symbols. So we're comparing and contrasting values and things like that. Comparing and contrasting is sort of easy for me when it comes to DOK, especially if it's intense like this in multiple different ways. I know what I'm thinking, but what are you thinking the DOK level of this? You thinking 3? Who else in the chat? Let's just see what the audience thinks. What DOK level do we think that standard is? I'm going to give you 5 seconds because it'll be awkward if I wait any longer. So start typing and pressing enter.
You awkward? No way, Chad. Sorry, buddy. I had to call you out on that one.
Oh, that's okay. I live on awkward. Okay. So this is absolutely, I 100% agree with you. That is clearly like a DOK level 3 sort of piece. So this brings me to an interesting point, Amanda, and that is I didn't really see any creative aspects of these standards. Students aren't having to make or create anything original, which to me tells me that there's not really any DOK level 4 in this group or this unit of standards. Now, that doesn't mean we don't want kids to get to that point, right? Which is why the grid has more levels than just 3. But our minimum requirement, and I think you agree with me, that means by the end of level 3 on this grid, we can then, if we develop it properly, so we still have to see if we do that, if we develop it properly, we can identify and say, if the student finishes that level 3 on the grid, that's our minimum bar. That's where we want every kid to get in the class. And then when we look at level 4 and the independent study, level 5, we can then have a little bit more freedom to let them explore and go beyond that standard. So that was a deep dive into how I think, and how hopefully Amanda thinks too, about looking at the standards you're covering. I know we took a little bit of time doing that. I didn't just start plugging stuff into the grid. Amanda didn't just start plugging stuff into the grid. We had to know where we are going. This is the number one component of backwards design, okay? That's what we're doing right now. We need to know where the students are going and what they're going to do before we lay out the pathway for them. So next step in the process, okay, we need to identify our learning targets. Now, I'm not actually going to go through the entire, like, creating all of the mastery questions and like units and stuff. I don't think we have time to do all that. So we're going to actually skip a little bit. So normally it would go, look at your standards, break them down into targets just for our audience right now. Identify your essential mastery questions. What do students need to be able to do? So what are we going to put into this grid that students need to be able to answer, and skills they need to have to prove mastery? Once you have that, you can then start plugging in your resources that match up with those things. So we, in this video today, and most of these videos, are going to go from standard, breaking down our DOKs with the targets, and then we're going to get into the grid a little bit quicker than you might if you were going into a workshop or doing a formal training with us, you know, at your school or something like that. So let's get into the targets. Are you ready, Amanda?
I'm so ready.
Okay, so I'm going to scroll over here, and we're going to look at the first level target that we have here. And this is the first step I take in any workshop that we do. We need to make targets. So your first target, Amanda, is for level 1 is I can understand place value within 1,000. I actually like how succinct and simple this is. There's one word I don't like about that, so I think you know what it is. So
I definitely know.
So one friendly suggestion I would have is, what do we want students to do with the place value? So the standard is really ambiguous about this. It just says understand. What does that mean to us so that we can measure it? So for me, do we want them to just identify place value? Do we want them to identify numbers within a 4-digit value? So should we add another target? Like, I'd like to kind of hear where your mind's at with this, or if you're happy with it, we can keep it. But I would like, what is a measurable statement we can put with the target? I love that it's an I can statement because it's focused on the student and what they're doing. But our first level target, how can we measure understanding of place value? What would a student do in your classroom to show that they knew this?
Well, and I'm kind of looking through what I've semi-plugged in based on my curriculum, which is something that our district, has adopted and
which we're going to talk about.
To use.
That's super important. We're going to put a pin in that. We're going to talk about that in a minute for sure.
And as I kind of look into not only what the standard says, but also kind of what I am envisioning this first level to look like, they need to be able to model 3-digit numbers. Mm-hmm. And they need to be able to name the place values. Those are kind of the two big parts. And they need to be able to understand that the 7 in 700 is 700. Mm-hmm. And the 60 or the 6 in 764 is 60. So what would you suggest here, sir?
So to me, we need to make it student friendly, and we're talking about second graders. So mm-hmm. I like how you just said that. I can name the place value in within 1,000, or I can name the place value within a 4-digit number. I think that's really simple, and I think a student could understand that target. Friendly reminder, targets are for students, standards are for teachers. No state has ever written a standard for a student to read, okay? When administrators and when school districts want you to write objectives and targets like we're doing right now, it's to articulate where you want your kids to go. That's why it's such an important part of the grid. So I really like, I can name the place value of numbers within 1,000.
Okay.
I think that's what I would put.
I am going to go ahead and change that if that's okay with you.
That sounds good to me. And look, like this is the building of the grid. It's happening right now, everybody. I think this is so exciting. I'm pretty excited. We have dozens of people watching this too right now. So this is a very popular topic. All right. So looking at that, is that sort of the breadth and the scope of what you want to cover in that first level? Do you feel good about that?
I feel good about that one.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to our second target, which would be the next step. So let me scroll up here. So this one says, so I have to switch my tabs here. Give me a minute, everybody. I can apply and demonstrate. So this is a really good tip too. So if you've ever attended a workshop or downloaded a template, there are words next to each of the levels. These are simply guides. You actually don't have to use the words apply or demonstrate. You can delete those words on the template. But these are simply generalizations of the types of activities students are going to be doing at this level, like a friendly reminder. Do not look at apply and demonstrate and go, that's the only thing these targets can say. It's totally okay if you branch out. So Amanda says, in this instance, I can apply what I know about place value within 1,000 to write 3-digit numbers in multiple ways. I really like this target. I think it's measurable. I think it's specific. And I think it's easy for a student to understand. Now, a second grader might need help with the word digit, right? Or maybe even the word multiple or something like that. But remember, if you're doing your daily goals in a grid method classroom, if you're talking about your targets and objectives, which, by the way, side note, you should do that as a teacher. You should actually have conversations with your students about objectives and about targets. They're not just for when the principal walks in the room. Students should know what they're learning. All the research supports when students know where they're headed, they learn better because they know where they're going. So I really like this target. So the only thing that I would suggest and what I have teachers do when we're building grids is looking at these two targets. Are you happy if we cover applying what they know about place value to be able to write 3-digit numbers, and scrolling back down, if they can name the place value? So level 1's naming those place values. Level 2 is a little bit higher level application and being able to really write those numbers in multiple ways, but with that full application of understanding. So if your students can do both of those things, are you happy after the first 2 levels?
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. So you'll notice that I'm kind of reviewing with Amanda, and I do this all the time. I'm checking with her because you need to have a conversation with your teacher self, okay? You need to be thinking, is this all they need? Am I happy if these are the 2 things that they can do by the end of this? Now, just as a reminder, there's 1 target and objective at each of these levels. There can be more than 1 if we needed to. So if Amanda would have said, you know what, Chad, I really need them to also be able to do something else with place value, or labeling something or categorizing something or something like that. We could put another target. We could say, I can categorize numbers based on place value or something. But she's happy, so I'm happy. So we'll be okay with it. If Amanda's happy, I'm always happy. So like we're good to go. Okay. So let's look at level 3. So just as a reminder, level 3 DOK is comparative analysis, arguments, defending. So here's something I want to be clear about. When I say comparative analysis, I don't mean categorization. Those are two very different cognitive tasks. Me taking a number or a topic, no matter what you're teaching, and putting it in this category or this category is DOK2 all day. Doing a T-chart, doing a quick placing something in a category. Me defending why it's in that category or citing evidence for why it's in that category. That's how we're increasing the DOK level, folks. That's how we're increasing the rigor for our students, okay? So I'm going to go to your third target. Amanda, you're doing great, by the way. I just need you
Thank you.
to know that. She's just putting it all out there for everyone to learn, and I love it. That's like TeachBetter through and through. Amazing. By the way, she is one of our amazing ambassadors as well. So just so everyone's aware. So I can compare and contrast numbers within 1,000. So can they compare and contrast? So what does that mean to you, Amanda? If you were measuring that, what would be like an example problem you would give a student to prove that they know that? I'm just curious, and I want the audience to kind of see what you're thinking as you make these targets.
Okay, so the biggest thing with this one is in this specific grouping, what they need to be able to do is to show that they can take two numbers and that they can look at the specific place values, applying what they've learned before to compare two numbers based on their place value. Now, it's not just doing the comparing. It's also explaining their understanding why they chose, the greater than, less than, equal to sign. And they have to be able to defend that. So it's not only just saying, hey, this number's bigger. They have to be able to explain, well, if you look at the tens place here and the tens place here, the ones are the same, the tens are different. Or the hundreds and ones are the same, the tens are different. And be able to defend that specific choice when it comes to it. So that's kind of where they need to get to throughout this level.
Okay, so I really like that you said that because this is making me think now. So now I'm a bit concerned, and it's not a huge deal. I'm a bit concerned this isn't specific enough of a target for level 3. And here's why. So comparing and contrasting numbers within 1,000, I could say that the number 1 is flat and 0 is rounded. Right? Like just based on their shape. And I'm still meeting this target. Okay. So does that make sense?
Yes,
so
it
you
does.
said something in your explanation of how you would say this, which is why that's such an important part of knowing how you're going to assess this. I think some of those components of greater than or less than either need to be an additional statement or added to this statement. I'm okay either way, but like I can compare and contrast numbers within 1,000 to assess if they are greater or less than one another or something like that.
I like that.
So you'll see it's not a lot I'm adding here, but that little bit allows you to measure that, right? Because now the student knows what they have to prove. So if anyone here has a standards-based report card, that is a statement that can go in a standards-based gradebook or mastery-based gradebook.
So say that again, Chad, because I got so excited about your explanation that I totally forgot what you said.
So I can compare and contrast numbers within 1,000 to assess if their value is greater or less than one another.
That look good to you?
Yeah.
That's not a
Nope. You were right.
I was gonna say, I think I used the right there,
nope,
Chad.
That was me. I was thinking of something else apparently.
Oh, goodness, real time, folks, real time.
Oh, so Kimberly McGee actually said something with an emphasis on understanding of place value.
Ooh,
so I can compare and
too.
contrast numbers within 1,000 to assess their value is greater or less than the value of one of one another based on place value.
Ooh, I love that.
Kimberly McGee
Thank you,
for the
Kimberly.
win. I love that. So Kimberly was actually saying, hey, wait a minute. Our focus is not greater than or less than here. It's really on place value. So I like
Thank
that.
you. Look at this. This is what this is all about. Taking all these
Exactly.
great minds and collaborating to put something together that's great for kids. So, yay.
Absolutely. So at this point, just to review, and once again, every time I write a target, I'm going to do this, and it's going to get monotonous, but this is how I want you to think about these things to make sure you're doing this the right way. So our level 1 is going to be, I can name the place value of numbers within 1,000. I like that. We change that a little bit. Level 2, apply what I know about place value within 1,000s to write 3-digit numbers so they know what those place values are. They can apply and write those numbers with understanding. I love it so far. And now we're stepping it up again where they're going to compare and contrast multiple numbers to assess their value of as greater or less than the value of one another or each other. I think we need to change that, but we can look at that later. Based on place value. I 100% agree with the based on place value thing because that makes it more measurable. I'm getting so excited and nerdy about this. It's not even funny, but I love that so much, so much. So at this point, so here's my question. So you know the standards better than I do. I've just looked at them. To me, I feel like this is doing a pretty good job of kind of meeting those things that we talked about up at the top. Based on your estimation at this point, is there any component of those standards that we're missing or that we need to go back and kind of evaluate? Or do you feel like this is kind of hitting? So like at this point, we said at the beginning that level 3 was it. Level 3 was like meeting that standard. So now we got to check ourselves, right? Now we got to make sure we're doing what we said we were going to do. So we're going to go back here. So understanding the 3 digits, check. That's definitely covered in 1. Count forwards and backwards. We may need to look at the counting part that may be inside one of those other ones. But the tens, hundreds, and so understanding, there maybe need to be a counting component somewhere in these levels that we missed. So that's something that we might need to go back to that I'm looking at. Read and write numbers, absolutely. Base tens, that's good. Equivalent representations. How are you feeling about adding something about this too in that level 3? Would that make sense to do?
Well, not specifically with what it's asking there. A lot of that I covered in the level 2.
Got you. Okay. Perfect.
Was that section. And then the one standard about the counting, that one there is covered more in the problem solving aspect. So that's one of those things that is kind of peppered throughout. And every once in a while it covers it kind of throughout when they're talking about using like a number line to
so it's
compare numbers.
It's not explicitly directly covered usually. It's like embedded.
Yes.
Got you. Okay. Like I said, you're the expert, so I'm going to trust you. But I just want people to hear us having these conversations for the benefit of this thought process. So I agree with you based on your analysis and based on your expertise. But you'll notice once we met that standard, we got to double check. We have to double check that we are meeting those components. Guys, if you're not doing this, at least in your own head or thinking about these things, you're just putting stuff into squares, okay? This is what makes these documents so powerful, because when you put your kids in the grid and they're working at their own pace, okay, you need to ensure that what they're doing is the most valuable and aligned it can possibly be. So that's why Amanda and I just spent 20 minutes literally digging through these targets. It's because it's worth it, because the payoff is that we know when this is done, it's going to meet the needs of those targets, and Amanda's kiddos are going to be better off because of it. So level 4. So this is beyond the standard, okay? So I can order numbers within 1,000 and use reasoning to predict what will come next. So I didn't read anything about prediction in that standard. So that requires higher level creative thinking potentially, which I think is where you were going with this, right? I absolutely love that. So are you happy with that as an extension for your students? If they can do that, are they like knocking it out of the park if they're able to do that?
At that point, I'm like, woo, look at you go.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're to the point where a lot of teachers get stuck and hung up, which is level 5. Okay, so level 4 was already a little bit of icing, right? So why do we even need a level 5? I'll tell you. Thanks for asking. The reason level 5 exists is because you might have students that scream through this, and you can't necessarily move to the next grid if you're doing unit to unit. So when we look at level 5, I don't ever want anyone, okay, that's watching this now or later on the recording, I don't want anyone that's watching this to lose sleep over level 5. I'm going to be honest. I actually kind of cheated on level 5 in almost all of the grids I ever did as a teacher. I didn't cheat. It was still cool. I would have students create their own projects on level 5. Okay. So instead of me sitting here and stewing over like what project or what thing I'm going to do, I literally created like a blank sheet. Okay. And it's questions. It says, what interested you about this unit? What would you like to explore further? What would you like to do to explore this further? How can I measure that you're extending beyond? And I would literally go through this and have a conversation with the students. And I would basically sign off and say, cool, you can do what you told me you were going to do for the next 3 days or 5 days or week or whatever that is. And it was such an empowering thing for the students. So if you are stuck on level 5 of your grid, don't be. Just simply, you can say, I can create and develop my own project to explain and demonstrate mastery of this topic. I literally put that as the target for almost every single grid that I ever had for level 5. And like, it was kind of a cop-out, not to lie, but it ended up being amazing for my students because they got to do so many cool projects that they came up with, okay? So I think, Amanda, you did an absolutely amazing job. I know we tinkered with it a little bit. I'm glad we got to tinker with it because that's why we're here, right? So I'm really glad that you, on purpose, like did some of those things so that we could fix them on live. So I'm wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So I told her to make mistakes because Amanda doesn't usually make any mistakes on her grids. So, so now I want to have the conversation about, we have our targets. We know where our kids headed. So we talked a little bit about how we're going to assess these things. So I'm going to count that as our mastery question development. I'm not skipping the step. I'm just kind of quickly going over it. But I want to make everyone aware that we do need to think about how we're assessing students on knowing these things. Okay. So let's start looking at what are we going to have students do to meet these needs. So you'll notice, I'm going to kind of scroll through here really slowly, that Amanda has put in some activities here. And a lot of them, some of them are kind of not book based, but a lot of them are, there's page numbers from the book. There's like specific videos. Now, to me, Amanda, it seems like, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm going to ask you to explain this. It seems like your district probably gives you a curriculum and goes, hey, listen, here's your resource. We need you to kind of implement this. Is that a correct statement?
That is an absolutely correct statement.
Okay, so I'm really glad you said that, because one of the most common things teachers tell me is they're like, I don't know if I can do grid because I already have a preset curriculum. And I love what you've done here is you've taken the curriculum that's preset and you've put in the pieces that meet the individual levels that you need them to. But there's also other stuff. Now, I don't know if I've showed anyone this on this video yet, but you'll notice Amanda did this awesome brainstorming section. So I'm going to just like scroll out here for a second. But she's actually put some of these ideas in here Okay. And I love this, Amanda. I don't know if you meant people to see this or not, but I really love this because this is you thinking as an educator, right? This is you kind of going into that vault, into those binders, and into those resources, and really just digging in and going, what do I have that I know works? So I do have a question for you. And the question is, what video resources do you use? That was the question. Could you answer that?
Yeah, our curriculum has a digital aspect as well. So in our curriculum, we actually have videos included for every single lesson
Oh,
that
cool.
kind of explain the concept to students in one way. And then also in that section are little quick checks that are included with the lessons. Those are like little online quizzes that students take based on the lesson as well.
Very cool. So I really like that, right? You're using what you have. You're not reinventing all the videos, right? You're not doing you had them available, so you use them. One really big idea here, whether this is the first time you're hearing about the grid method or you're in it, don't overthink it. If you have good resources, I said good resources. If you have good resources, use them. Do not use them blindly. So if Amanda would have shown me this grid and it would have literally been everything directly from her curriculum without her thinking about it, just kind of assuming it works, I would have probably had a longer conversation with her right now. But you'll notice she's already thought, kind of sprinkling these things in. And she's thought about, what do I have that's going to keep my kids engaged? It's going to keep them excited. And I've been to Amanda's classroom. She's got kids pre-COVID. I went to her classroom. Don't worry, everybody. Um, she's got kids on the ground playing games and doing card sorts and cheering because they get past their level. It's like the coolest classroom in the world. If you ever get the chance to visit Amanda's classroom, do it because it's fantastic. But you'll see here, she doesn't let the curriculum box her in. She's using the curriculum to supplement her creativity. And she's going, now I can add, now that I have this curriculum piece, I can add the what number am I game or the place value matchup, which could be like a card sort or the spin and write or the three ways to show. Like, this is so cool that you like wrote all these ideas down. Like, you're my favorite person right now.
Oh my gosh, that's such a compliment.
Like, but it's so cool that you did that to me, because it's really just showing the planning process. So here, looking at level one, we've got three probably pretty solid videos with some practice of and repetition. So what are we thinking as we look at our level one? What are some of those activities that you think we could plug in there in the B, D, or F, or maybe even just the B and D? We don't have to use all of them. It's kind of up to you. But what are you thinking just off the top of your head? What would fit? So we have a lesson, understanding hundreds. Um, understanding hundreds. So they just completed that activity. And you'll notice that there's a quick check. Okay. So there's a built in assessment in that. So she's got, here's what the students are doing. There's a 3-step kind of assignment that they have to do. They complete the quick check. They need a computer and a math book. She knows that her students know what they need. And she's assessing based on their responses on the quick check. So if they get all the responses correct on the quick check, or at least that 80% that we're looking for with in a grid method classroom, they are ready to go on to that next assignment. So what are you thinking, Amanda, would be a good next step after they understand hundreds or they've started to understand hundreds?
I mean, first of all, I just want to let people know why I do this the way that I do this, because I think
I'd love to hear it.
getting into the mind of someone going through and planning this, um, you have to think about your kids. And while I may have kids who will flourish with that box A, which I label my boxes A through Z because it's easier for second graders to understand.
As opposed to
Um,
1A, 1B, that they gotcha.
exactly. And what I do is I look at, some kids are going to be fine going through, and that online quick check is going to be really easy for them. And, you know, they understand it, they can move on, no harm, no foul. You have kids who really struggle with anything technology based, because it's just not how they think. So
Right.
what I do is I always try to provide a hands-on type of activity or a paper
Love it.
pencil or something that goes with each lesson, because you have to hit all of those modalities, because some kids need that hands-on. You cannot just box a kid in to one way. Oh no, I'm on my soapbox, Chad.
I
You
love it. Keep going. You
you
just go.
cannot
You got
box
it.
a kid into one way of learning, especially not in the world we're in today. Because if you want those kids to be the creative thinkers that we want them to be, you cannot say this is the one way you have to prove this. And so many times we've talked about, oh boy, here I am. So many times we've talked about, if your career was decided in one day and one activity that you completed, is that truly fair? No. So if I have a kid
Right.
who struggles to do the online quick checks and I know that, yes, I'm going to look for their master on the quick check. What will probably happen is they probably won't meet that 80%. I'll do some type of intervention with them, do a paper pencil check with them instead. And then that next box gives them a different way to prove what they know that may be more in their wheelhouse. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out
Love it.
there, that's how I create these things. And it's one of those processes. Once you get into it, you realize that if you do the same thing every single time, they're going to get bored and they're going to get frustrated. So I
Yes.
don't do that.
Oh, that was the best soapbox ever. This is something I preach at workshops all the time. Check for multiple modalities. Check, like, because no kid's ever been excited for module 9.3. Like, that's never happened, right? But they've been really excited to play a game with their friend. They've been really excited to do the card sort that they see the kid doing across the hall or across the classroom. So, like, multiple modalities, mixing it up. You're preaching the best stuff right now. This is a great way to kind of look through this. So I have a question. Could you start plugging in some ideas for maybe like B and D of what types of things you might put there? And I'm going to address the question. So we're going to like double team this because we only got like 10 more minutes. Okay.
Oh my gosh,
So
how do we only have 10 more minutes?
you were just that awesome, Amanda. Okay. I don't know. It just happened. Okay. So we can go over if we have to, though. It's not like a huge deal. So
Okay.
I'm going to answer Barb's question while you kind of continue to work through level 1. Is that fair? And it
That
doesn't have
sounds
to be
great.
perfect. Let's just get the ideas in the squares and then we can fill in the details later. That's cool with me.
That sounds
So
great.
Amanda, you're going to be able to watch her live as she kind of works on her grid here as we just talk through looking for those multiple modalities, looking for those things. Everyone's watching Amanda, so she's going to feel super nervous. It's going to be
It's
awesome.
fine. It's fine.
So do you build in partner games or collaboration time? Absolutely, you can do that. Okay. I've actually seen this in Amanda's classroom. Like, there'll be two students that are both at box D on the grid. So they're playing a collaborative game together. So, Barb, you can absolutely do that. But here's the cool part about the grid method and partner work and collaboration. Normally, when we do heterogeneous collaboration with students, okay, normally when we do heterogeneous collaboration with students, one student knows more than the other because they're naturally at different places. So, like, one student ends up pulling more of the weight and then it gets unbalanced, and then one student's not having a good time or they're doing all the work. If you're having students when they both get to, let's say, D on the grid, you can create like a wait list, or they can kind of start E and then come back when a student's ready. And now two students that are ready for in that zone of proximal development, okay, are doing that collaborative partner work at the same time. You can also pair students up purposefully if you want to do heterogeneous grouping. But in terms of cognitive understanding, like, that's absolutely okay too. So I absolutely love what Amanda's doing right now because it reminds me of how I used to make my grids. No joke. I would literally plug in basic ideas just like she's doing right now. Everything wasn't there, everything wasn't complete, but they were getting onto the paper. That is a great way to kind of get your thoughts down and then evaluate, tinker, and adjust, okay? So Another person said, does everything in the box need to be done, or is it like, does the student have a choice? Teachers do this in different ways, okay? The way Amanda has this laid out, most of the students are probably going to do most of the stuff in these boxes. They're going to watch the video, they're going to review the pages, they're going to do the quick check. Is that overall correct, Amanda? But
Yes. Yeah.
let's say Amanda wanted to give some options for her students. She could easily say, do one of these three things or do one of these two things, and it could all be in box C on the grid. Then if the student doesn't understand it after doing the first thing, you have your remediation built right in there. So I have teachers do it both ways. You can have multi-part assignments like Amanda is showing you right here. Thank you for that great example, Amanda. Or you could provide some choice in voice for the students and give multiple options in the same box. So you can absolutely do that. Amanda's also just like me because she tries to format things and make it look perfect. I was the exact same way. It just bothered me like to no end. So
it drives me crazy.
So real quick, let's just take a quick look at our first level, and then we'll kind of talk through these other levels and the kind of stuff you're going to have kids do. Okay. So in level 1, there's that book activity with the video, which is more of like a traditional kind of video lesson. Then they're doing a hands-on cut and paste activity, right? Matching blocks to the number. So they're really getting that tactile motor memory going, actually moving things and interacting with those numbers. I love it. And here's the other secret. That kid that's not finished with lesson A that sees the other kids start pasting stuff on the paper, guarantee you is going to ask, what are they going to ask, Amanda? What are they going to ask?
They're going to say, what are they doing? I want to do that.
Exactly. Yes. They're going to ask what that kid's doing and when they get to do it. And then you get to say, I'm so glad you asked. When you show that you understand lesson A, I'll let you get started on lesson B. So just keep on working. That's called motivation, folks. Okay. That's how we drive more engagement and more learning in the classroom. So I'm feeling pretty good about your level 1 right now. I know we still have to put what the students need and how you're going to assess these things, right? But I think you have some solid ideas. We have some great pieces here that students are going to be doing. So here's my sort of self-reflection check for anyone building a grid, right? And I'm going to do this after every level. I'm not going to do this after every level because we're running out of time here. But when I'm looking at the level, because we built an entire level at this point from the standard level 1 target to the entire grid, what I would have you do, Amanda, and what we need to do is we need to go, if a student completes to mastery all of these subjects, do we feel confident that they can name the place value of numbers within 1,000? Do you feel confident that if they complete all of these things that you can say, yes, they can?
Yeah, and I think it's because I've made sure that along the way I'm checking throughout. So if they really truly don't understand something, that's when I can pull those kiddos and do some intervention with them on that specific thing. So
Yes.
as long as I'm checking through every box, the whole goal is to get back to that target. So everything I've put in there, I think, is going to work its way back to that target.
Absolutely. So there's a great question that says, do you pull groups and meet with all learners, or is this mostly self-guided? Seriously, okay, I'm going to not go on a soapbox here. I'm going to actually, do you have a response to this on how you do this? And
I
then
do.
I'll just add to it because I'll just go forever if I.
I do. I have a feeling what Chad was going to say is because kids are doing grid, they're not teaching themselves. I have a feeling that's what he was probably going to say. And I explain this to my parents before I start grid every year with these kids because parents will think that their kid is teaching themselves. So what I do is I will do mini lessons with students based on kind of where the majority of them are. So to kick this off, I'm not going to just like set them off and say, here, start with box A. I'm going to do kind of a preview. I'm going to do vocabulary with them. And we do that whole group together before we ever dive into this grid. Because if they don't understand that background knowledge, they're not going to understand the lesson. You're going to get to box A and they're going to go, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're going to shut down. So I do mini lessons. And a lot of times I see that some students are struggling on the same concepts. So I may pull half of my class if kids are stuck on C. I might pull them and say, hey, you're going to work with me for a little while. I may go back and repeat a mini lesson that I did before just to remind them. Or if it's one or two kids, I'll pull them and say, okay, we're going to do this in a different way. I'm going to explain this to you in a way other than what I've shown you, what you've seen. That way you can see it in a different way. And honestly, the one-on-one that I get with students now is leaps and bounds over the one-on-one I ever got with students before. So I keep a track of who I meet with each day because I want to know what I'm meeting with them for, what their struggles were, what their successes were. And that way the next day I know, hey, Johnny had trouble with this yesterday. I'm going to make sure I check in with him and see how he's doing today. So the whole entire thing is you can pull small group, you can do whole group, you can do one-on-one, and you are always, always, always meeting with students, always.
Yeah, that was good. I don't know how much else I have to add to that. So you can totally still do mini lessons. You should be pulling an intervention and doing small groups as you need to. The cool thing is you should know more of what your students need than you ever did before because you're progress monitoring, which we haven't really mentioned. So I'm not sure about the COVID restrictions district to district. Someone asked like small groups with COVID. Most districts I've worked with have a 10-minute limit. So with masks, with a small group, you can be with students for up to 10 minutes and then you have to disperse. That is something that I've seen a lot of districts doing. But if you need to do a socially distanced group, that's okay too. I mean, I would just work within the confines that you have is how I would respond to that. But yes, this is somewhat self-guided, but it's not self-taught. Self-paced learning is not self-taught learning. So I'm absolutely so glad that we were able to do this with you, Amanda. So real quick, I'm going to just do a quick review of all the work that we did to kind of close things out. So we broke down the standard, talked about DOK, and we made sure we knew what was being asked of us and the learners in your classroom. Then we worked on our targets and we checked and meticulously looked at those targets and said, are they meeting the DOK level? Are they meeting the needs of the standard? Are they doing what we need them to? Then I love that you did this. You plugged in the resources that you knew you had to cover from your curriculum. You sprinkled them in there. And it wasn't just straight in a row. It was, this is where they fit. These are where I'm going to put things in. And then we got creative and we said, how are we increasing engagement, keeping it fun, and keeping it exciting for our students? So I absolutely love your thought process. I love that you let our audience and our network into that thought process. Evan Sanchez just said, this has been very helpful. Thank you so much. And bringing the elementary point of view. His only question is, how many learning opportunities should you have per level? My response to this is kind of simple. However many it takes to master the target that you said they were supposed to. So Evan, you could have less or more than we did tonight on this grid, okay? But you might have more. I wouldn't recommend like many more than we have. I think, 6, 7 is probably like the top of the range. However, I definitely think that more or less depending on what your needs are. You want to make sure that by the time that they finish the level, they know what you said they were supposed to know. That seems pretty simple to me, and absolutely. So many people just thanking us, and you mostly, they don't really care that I'm here. That's fine. But Amanda is amazing. So real quick, so we then placed everything in the level 1. So we showed you how to really develop that level. So at this point, what Amanda's probably going to do, and Amanda, you can correct me if I'm wrong, she's going to fill in some of those details for level 1, and then she's going to probably delete some of those cells in the other levels to make it make sense. She's going to merge some of those cells, make it look pretty and presentable for her students or for her principal and everything else. But this is still a work in progress. It's not complete. We didn't say it was going to be completely done, so that's okay. But this is just something that I hope this was valuable for everybody. It was super valuable to me, and you just blew me away with how awesome you were mostly. So another thing I want to touch base with the number of assignments, and I know I'm going over here, but that's okay. There should be less assignments as you get higher in the grid because they're more complex. It's going to take your students longer. So there should be more stuff at the bottom, less stuff as you go up. It's not always going to be perfect. It's going to be different every now and then, but that's a general rule of thumb that you can try to follow. So Amanda, we haven't really talked about how we're going to share this yet, but please, 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 whenever you finish this grid, I think it would be great if you just made a copy of it so they don't mess up your original. I will have Amanda make a copy of this, and we will make sure it gets put into the comments of this video if it gets published in those pieces like that. So when you're watching it later, you can click and see all the work that we were doing. So I'm going to remove the grid so it's just me and Amanda now. Amanda, any parting thoughts? Any thoughts? I want to thank you again, first of all. How are you feeling about this process? And how are you feeling about what you got to share tonight? I'm just kind of interested.
Can we do this like all the time? This was so beneficial. Again, I'm a teacher who's been doing this for 3 years, but you learn and grow every single year. And you'll notice I'll leave my notes on the bottom of the document whenever I share it out. That way you guys can see kind of what I did. I put in there things like, how am I going to turn this from, what I've had it to friendly for now because of everything going on. So, you're always learning and changing. And I know that there's a lot going on right now, and you've done a lot of pivoting this year. But I will tell you that this right here saved me when we were remote last year. And it was really reassuring to know that I could make sure my students had all of this information and that they would be able to work through this and continue their learning even without me being physically present with them. And, going back and forth throughout this year, it has been a blessing. And I want to thank Chad for, first of all, creating this, because, I wish that everybody would teach this way. But, I know that some people, it's just not their thing. And I respect, people as long as they have their own way of doing things, but I prefer this way. So, yeah, so just thank you so much for allowing me to do this. I was nervous because when you get to create with the Grid Creator, it's kind of a little nerve-wracking, even though I've known you for 3 years and we talk all the time. But, just thank you so much for this. And I hope that those of you who watch this get some benefit out of this. And if you ever have any questions, of course, you can always talk to, Chad, but you can always connect with me as well. I will make sure when I share out the document that I will share contact information as well. That way you can get a hold of me if you have any questions, especially for those of you who are in the lower elementary grades, because it's so hard to get people to jump on board because they just don't think their kids can do it. So I will go on my soapbox about that another day.
That's a whole nother video.
Not today, another video. So just, reach out. You can find me on Twitter at AmandaPost1513, and on Instagram at AmandaLorraine1513. So, just hit me up or ask Chad and he can get my contact information to you too. Chad, you have my permission. Share away.
Absolutely. Amanda, I cannot thank you enough. You are always amazing. I really want the whole comments to just be filled with green hearts for Amanda right now. This is honestly the reason I wanted Amanda to go first, because I knew she was a pro and she's been doing this for longer than some other people that I could have brought here. But she truly does an amazing job. I've witnessed it in her classroom myself. And just keep up the amazing work, Amanda. Thank you so much for just putting yourself out there. I know this wasn't easy because even I would be nervous doing this, putting my own work, but this is her planning process, guys. She just put herself out there for every single person watching this now and into the future. So, Amanda, thank you for being a pioneer and doing our first Building a Grid live. So, everyone, have a fantastic evening, day, morning, whenever you ended up watching this. Amanda, thank you again, and stay awesome, everybody. See ya.